Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Both the UCP and NDP held their conventions over the weekend. We hear messages from both Premier Smith and NDP leader Rachel Notley about their plans for Alberta. Lawyer Eva Chepiuk with the Justice Centre has an update for us from the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act taking place in Ottawa. And our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says the UN is allegedly informing migrants from around the world how to illegally enter the United States.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta United Conservative Party and the NDP held their annual general meetings over the weekend. BCN's Naveen Day was at the UCP convention in Enoch, located just outside of Edmonton. And as we hear in this next report, Alberta Premier Daniel Smith took aim at Alberta Health Services for the shortage of healthcare providers.
It was close to a packed house at the United Conservative Annual General Meeting on the Enoch Cree Nation over the weekend. During her keynote address, Alberta Premier Daniel Smith fired shots at NDP leader Rachel Notley for supporting increases to the federal carbon tax and blamed her for alleged inefficiencies within Alberta Health Services management.
Rachel Notley is on the record that she supports this carbon tax increase 100%. That's what she thinks is good for Alberta families. Well, I don't. Albertans can't afford these woke, incompetent NDP policies, whether in Ottawa or in Edmonton. The system, my friends, is broken. Most of those managing AHS today are holdovers from the NDP years. They have had their chance to fix this bloated system, and they have largely failed on almost all accounts. Failure is no longer an option.
Following her speech, Smith spoke to the media, where she delivered yet another apology. This time it was to those who she had previously called the most discriminated group she had ever witnessed in her lifetime.
I'm deeply sorry for anyone who was inappropriately subjected to discrimination as a result of their vaccine status. I'm deeply sorry for any government employee that was fired from their job because of their vaccine status, and I welcome them back if they want to come back.
And according to political blogger Vince Byfield, Smith needs to do more than just apologize to the unvaxxed. He says she needs to repair division that was created due to provincial health mandates.
I strongly encourage her to do things within her party to help both sides see what they've gone through, right? It's kind of like a truth and reconciliation for the unvaxxed.
The UCP is gearing up for a provincial election in the spring of 2023. And according to Deputy Premier and Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf, unity within the UCP is key to keeping the Notley NDP out of government.
Show them that we work together as a party, and in that unity we balance cabinet. We're going to take a balanced approach to the province. We're going to address a number of key issues like affordability, healthcare reform, and we're going to govern well. And I think once Albertans know that, I hope to see them give us a second mandate.
Albertans will go to the polls on May 29th to pick which party will form the province's next government. Premier Smith has stated that she will not call an election earlier than the prescribed date. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Now, in an effort to increase support ahead of next spring's provincial election, Alberta's official opposition held their own convention in Calgary over the weekend. This marked the unofficial launch of their party's campaign. Angela Stewart was there and has more on the NDP's plan to help Albertans.
Setting the stage ahead of the general election next year, NDP leader Rachel Notley says she is ready to start campaigning.
Yeah, it's getting campaign-ish for sure. We're in that stage. This is not only the biggest convention we've ever had in Calgary, this is the biggest convention we've ever had ever.
Speaking to a crowd of Calgarians on Saturday during the NDP's annual general meeting, Notley shared her party's plans and priorities with the hope to garner more votes.
Albertans want to know who we are and what we're going to do.
Notley says her party plans to put a cap back on utility bills and freeze the gas tax at the pumps, adding that Albertans need a responsible government.
And so they really are looking for stable, responsible, evidence-based, responsive government. And that's going to be a key part of our economic offer going forward.
And even while prices are soaring, the UCP has made it worse because they've also decided to take money away from Alberta families. They threw tens of thousands of Albertans off the seniors drug plan, as I just mentioned. That is shameful.
When asked what her strategy is going forward to take on UCP leader Danielle Smith, Notley says she plans to continue to keep building a relationship with voters.
They know who she is, they know what she has to say, and more as a result, they're coming to us to say, okay, so what's your plan? We need to know more about you because we want to know what your offer is because we are looking elsewhere and you are where we're looking.
Alberta's next provincial general election is slated for May 29th, 2023. And Notley says she feels optimistic that she will become the province's premier once again.
Let me tell you, if hard work and dedication and commitment to public service can win you an election, then I think we're in a good place.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Canada's competition watchdog is launching a study into the grocery industry. It's seeing whether the sector is contributing to rising food costs, which increased at the fastest pace since 1981. Prices are up 11.4% from last month. The Competition Bureau says it will explore how the federal government could act to combat grocery price increases. Earlier this month, the House of Commons voted unanimously in favor of an NDP motion calling on the government to tackle corporate greed in the grocery sector. Interim Police Chief Steve Bell says the Ottawa Police Service did not have intelligence suggesting the Freedom Convoy would use local citizens as a leverage point. Bell is testifying to the Public Order Emergency Commission as the inquiry into the Emergencies Act continues. Bell was questioned by a commission lawyer about a threat assessment police prepared for the convoy's expected arrival on January the 29th. Eva Chipyuk is a lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. Now she's at the public inquiry and joins us now from Ottawa. Eva, so far we've heard from police, but when will we hear from Tamara Leach, the organizer of the Freedom Convoy, or others who participated in the convoy to hear their side of what transpired last February?
So far we have heard from, first it was some Ottawa residents, businesses, then councillors with the City of Ottawa. We then moved on to some of the staff, senior staff at the Ottawa level, the mayor, and then we moved into the OPP and the OPS, so the police authorities on the ground. What I think the commission is doing is kind of laying the foundation of what was going on locally. After that, we're going to, it looks like, get into the protesters. So I anticipate the protesters' evidence coming in next week already. And then after that, which makes sense, look at the federal response after saying the local, what was going on in a local level, what the protesters were doing, and then the federal responses, which is really the reason that we're here.
Could we see more lawsuits against either the City of Ottawa or the federal government being launched as the truth comes out during this inquiry?
A few people have been asking about that, and it's a little bit early to say right now, but I think that once we get all of the evidence in through this process, the inquiry process, it's going to really inform a lot of people about what their next steps could be in terms of lawsuits, and certainly with respect to the City of Ottawa or the Ottawa Police Services, I would anticipate something would come out of that.
Thanks so much, Eva. That was Eva Chipyuk, lawyer for the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, who's at the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act, running for the next 5 weeks in Ottawa. Well, we had kind of a slushy start to the work and school week. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, thanks to warmer temperatures, a lot of the weekend snow we received in Lethbridge should be gone soon.
Yeah, most of it appears to be gone already. I got outside a little bit this afternoon and there's just a few patches left here and there, but most of the snow already gone. We did reach our daytime high today of 6 degrees with some gusty winds from the west at 40 to 60 kilometers per hour. Now those winds will be sticking around into this evening as we reach an overnight low of 2 degrees. Gusty winds tomorrow as well, Tuesday with a high of 7 degrees and a mix of sun and cloud. I will be back later on in the show to let you know how the rest of the week is shaping up, and I'll give you a hint. It's going to get warmer.
That's good news. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Canada Post has unveiled a pretty cool new stamp. This one features an Indigenous war hero by the name of Tommy Prince. Prince, who was from Manitoba, was the recipient of the Silver Star, and he passed away in 1977 at the age of 62. He was Canada's most decorated First Nations soldier who fought in both the Second World War and the Korean War. Lethbridge police need our help finding 34-year-old Tia Blood, who was last seen in West Highlands in Lethbridge on October the 19th. She's described as an Indigenous female, 5 foot 3 inches tall, around 170 pounds, with mid to shoulder length hair, and has the name Cade tattooed on the back of her neck. Police say due to an injury, she may also be limping. An investigation revealed that Blood's cell phone was traced back to the Cardston area, and the truck she was driving was also located in Cardston, and a male and female who were inside fled the scene. Police are still looking for them. If you can help police with their investigation, you're asked to call this number right away, 403-328-4444. Lethbridge emergency crews were called out to a fire around 2:30 Monday afternoon. When our crews arrived, firefighters were still battling the blaze. Details are sketchy, but it appears as though the fire originated near the top floor of a residential home by the McDonald's near Mayor McGrath Drive North. So far, there have been no reports of any injuries, and the cause of the blaze is under investigation. Divers were able to recover the body of 55-year-old Brooks resident who was reported missing on October the 19th. Brooks RCMP say the worker was doing maintenance on a dam in Lake Newell when he disappeared. Occupational health and safety has been brought in and will be conducting an investigation into what happened. It's been a full year since Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan and members of council were sworn in as our current city council. Now, many of the councillors, including John Middleton Hope, say serving on council for the past 365 days has truly been an honor.
I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great year. I have been incredibly impressed with my colleagues and their knowledge and their commitment. That's probably been the best thing about the last year. I've really enjoyed that. They are very, very committed to trying to make this city a better place for everybody to live in. So yes, it's been a good year.
Looking ahead to the next 3 years, Mayor Blaine Hagan says he's really looking forward to seeing more doctors arrive in our community as the doctor shortage continues.
It's something that we're very focused on is helping that. I know even though that is not a city council initiative per se, it's a mandate of the provincial government, but us being able to showcase our community and work with the current doctors. So it's not just recruitment, but it's also that retention as well. And so in working with the different doctor groups and the different clinics and just finding out what their struggles are within the community so that we can keep them within our community as well.
Mayor Higgins says they're really looking forward to continuing the next 3 years as a unified city council. The mind is a very tough place to navigate. Many would say this is especially true for men. A Lethbridge woman is doing her part to try to destigmatize the issue of men who've been afraid of seeking help for their mental health issues. As we see and hear in this next story, she does this by offering therapy in a unique way that men can appreciate. Video journalist Micah Quinn has the story now on The Mind Mechanic.
My main goal is to reframe how men, especially like blue-collar, manly-type men, think about getting help and therapy, right?
Kaylee Gorzitza is the owner of Mind Mechanic, a mobile mental health service tailored toward helping blue-collared men. She started the business earlier this year in July and is a certified health coach after receiving her University of Lethbridge psychology degree. She is also a mechanic by trade. The way she does therapy for men is quite different than any typical lay down on a couch session.
It's not as intimidating when inside is like a man cave, right? It's more casual. I have a foosball table in there. We can just have a chat and open up. And some guys, when they think of therapy, they think of, laying on the couch, and that doesn't really appeal to them. So I want to do something completely different than the typical counselor therapist that most men might think of.
According to Stats Canada, men make up more than 75% of suicides in our country, and the number of men who take their own lives is approximately 3 times higher than women. Gorzitza also puts out videos on TikTok explaining the similarities of how maintaining your mental health is just like maintaining your car.
You have to stay on top of stuff. When things start making noise in your car, you usually take it to a specialist. So what's the difference, right? And the negative thoughts and emotions in our brain are like dirty oil, right? We have to get it out once in a while. It's the same thing. You just stay on top of stuff so that stuff doesn't break down and you have catastrophic failure. You can have that in your life too.
Gorzitza says her next step for Mind Mechanic is to try to partner with local businesses to be able to help men who need mental health support right here in Lethbridge. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
What a cool, unique idea. That's wonderful. Take a book and leave one. That's the message of the Little Lethbridge Library program here in our city. There's a new mobile library set up at Gyro Park. Now, staff from the Lethbridge Public Library say they still have people coming up with locations around the city for where they would like to have a new little library.
I'd say they've maintained a real steady popularity. During the pandemic, they became kind of essential tools for us to get books out to people, and we did mobilize and fill them all up with library book discards and also coloring sheets, and we worked with Building Brains together to put activities on the side. So you might notice that some of them still have that parental and kid play information on the side.
The little libraries are stocked with discarded books from the Lethbridge Public Library. The Ability Resource Centre comes out to make sure there are always fresh books for lovers of literature. BC's newly minted Premier is promising significant action to bolster the province's affordable housing. David Eby is also promising more funding for healthcare, public safety, and the environment.
For the families that are earning a decent income out there and you're looking around and you can't find a place you can afford to buy, you can't find a place you can afford to rent, we are on your side. We will deliver that housing for you. We will make sure. For those of you who are looking at your downtown cores and you are distressed about seeing people who are visibly ill living in the streets of your community, that it makes you feel that your downtown is not as safe as it used to be. For the people who are living outside, who do not have security, who do not feel safe, because how can you feel safe when you're living in a tent or a structure you made out of cardboard? We will deliver for you. You will see significant initiatives around public safety out of our government that address the core issues and that make your downtowns safe for you.
Well, the matchups are set for the World Series. The Houston Astros will be taking on the Philadelphia Phillies after sweeping the New York Yankees in 4 straight, winning the AL pennant. Baseball fans for both clubs celebrated their teams making the World Series on Sunday night. They were pretty excited. You could just feel that excitement. I just wish the Toronto Blue Jays would have made it to the World Series. It would have been great seeing the Jays and the Phillies have a rematch from the '93 World Series. Well, it's not exactly looked like baseball weather here in southwestern Alberta, but fortunately, a lot of the snow we received has melted, and those warmer conditions should continue. A full look at the forecast is coming up. You know, it was kind of a slushy drive in many parts of the city today. A lot of the snow from the weekend has melted. Jeanette Roche is in now with all of our weather details. Jeanette, a lot of the snow we received may be gone by the end of the week?
Yeah, we're not seeing any more snow in the forecast, at least for now. And as promised, the days are getting warmer. So look at these temperatures. We're up to 7 degrees from 6 tomorrow, up to 8 degrees from 7, and then climbing up to 9 degrees on Thursday with lots of sunshine. There's those double digits by the time we get to the weekend, high of 13 on Friday, and then 14 degrees for both Saturday and Sunday. So not bad temperatures. We're almost at the average high and even climbing higher than that on the weekend. Average high for this time of year, 12 degrees. Low average is -2. The record high for this day was back in 1992. It was 23 degrees, and the record low was 1957. They reached -16 degrees, so that was pretty chilly for this time of year. 8:07, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sun set this evening at 6:24 p.m., giving us 10 hours, 17 minutes of daylight. Okay, so temperatures across the nation for tomorrow, high of 11 degrees in Victoria with rain. Rainy also in Vancouver, high of 10 with gusty winds up to 60 km. Edmonton looking at a high of 12 degrees with rain mixing with some flurries and freezing rain. 3 degrees only the high in Calgary with a mix of sun and clouds. So not as much of the rain or the flurries happening in Calgary, but the lower temperature. In the rest of the prairies, we are seeing chances of flurries in Saskatoon with a high of 4, -1 the high in Regina tomorrow with a chance of flurries as well. And some early morning light snow in Winnipeg with a high of 2 degrees. Also keep in mind in those prairie cities, we're looking at wind chill factors, especially in the morning. Not so much here though. Toronto, high of 18 degrees. Ottawa's high, 21 tomorrow. 23 degrees the high in Montreal tomorrow. And they actually have a humidex there of 29 tomorrow. Also, UV indexes are at play as well in central Canada. Fredericton, the high tomorrow, 18 degrees with rain Rainy conditions also in Halifax, 19. Drizzle in Charlottetown with a high of 21 and a high of 17 degrees in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow. There you go. That is your forecast.
Are you tired of high energy bills? Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Canada's competition watchdog is launching a study to explore how the federal government could act to combat increasing grocery prices. It says it will look into whether changing competitive dynamics in the highly concentrated sector are contributing to rising food costs, which increased last month to an annual rate of 11.4%. The competition agency says it will publish a final report with recommendations for the government next June. The announcement came after all parties voted unanimously in favor of an NDP motion calling on the government to tackle corporate greed in the grocery sector. The Bank of Canada is expected to announce another interest rate hike on Wednesday. It'll be edging the bank closer to what has been one of the fastest monetary policy tightening cycles in its history. Economists say at this point, it's a toss-up if the Bank of Canada will increase its key lending rate by 0.5 or 0.75 of a percentage point. A raise on Wednesday would be the 6th consecutive rate hike this year as the Bank of Canada responds to decades-high inflation. The annual inflation rate slowed to 6.9% last month, but is still well above the bank's 2% target. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 57 points on the day to finish at 18,918. The Dow was up 417 points to 31,499. The S&P 500 was up 44 on the day to 3797, and the Nasdaq was up 92 points to 10,952. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 24 cents to 84.81 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 22 cents to 5.18 US. Gold was down 5 cents to 16.49.74 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 19.23 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.65 per bushel, barley's at $9.68, canola's at $20.23, and corn is at $12.14 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.13 to $151.60. Feeder cattle were up 40 cents to $175.68, and lean hogs December contract was down $1.20 to $87.93. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $72.96. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta's UCP and NDP held their conventions over the weekend. One of the messages delivered by Premier Daniel Smith was that the staffing problem in our healthcare sector was attributed to poor decision-making by Alberta Health Services. NDP leader Rachel Notley says the Premier is insulting healthcare workers in order to, quote, dog whistle to conspiracy theorists. There are reports that Iran is testing attack drones on Ukrainian civilians for potential future use on Israel. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have details shortly. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. There are new reports saying that the Biden administration has given out so much military assistance to Ukraine to combat Russian forces that it has risked not having enough weapons to help defend Taiwan should China attack. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles. Lisa, the claims are being made by former top national security officials.
It's mind-boggling, right? To think that a world power like the United States that is very calculated in its military efforts, in its military assistance, would make this maybe, I guess, miscalculated step in, providing Ukraine with so much aid. I mean, let alone all the money, the billions of dollars that have gone into this, and then the military weaponry, enough that we would leave ourselves perhaps vulnerable to not having enough to help Taiwan should they need it. And as we know, China is definitely looking like it's going to invade Taiwan sometime soon. It doesn't look like it's too far out. Perhaps taking a page from Putin's handbook and seeing how he has gone forward with, working against global condemnation and not perhaps caring as much or seeing that there aren't too many consequences. The only consequence here is all the money and military apparatuses that are being flooded into Ukraine, but then just waiting for Putin to take the next step. So Xi Jinping of China will perhaps think that that will be the same for him, and then the United States won't be able to perhaps insert itself or to assist Taiwan in the way that they have pledged to do so. Remember, Nancy Pelosi made a visit there. We saw other lawmakers copy her move and go there and give them that vote of confidence that the United States is behind them. Well, perhaps not.
So how would the Biden administration actually approach that if China did invade Taiwan? Would it be very similar to what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine? Just kind of give, weaponry and then money?
Perhaps. I mean, for right now, it's just a little, rebuking them from the podium and showing more support towards Taiwan to perhaps deter China from making that move, and also having some sort of presence in and around China and Taiwan to show that there is obviously interest in supporting and defending Taiwan should something happen. But again, hoping that this deters China and they do not make the invasion.
Lisa, there are reports that Iran is testing attack drones on Ukrainian civilians for potential future use on Israel. Now, this claim is by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry that said hundreds of these drones have allegedly been unleashed on civilians across Ukraine.
Right. So we know that there have been deals made with Russia and many of the rogue adversaries of the United States, including North Korea and the Iran regime. We know that they got drones from the Iran regime. There were several visits by Russian officials to Iran since June, and that has been documented. And now the Iran regime has denied supplying drones to Russia, and we know, in fact, that those are Iranian drones. And the worry is that this is just a practice run for the Iran regime to see how their weapons fare in the battlefield, and then to perhaps use them on Israel, which is their closest enemy. They remember the big Satan is the United States, and the little Satan is Israel. And that has been the narrative of this regime for 43 years. So, of course, any short-range weaponry that they have, they would try to use it on Israel, and that is the worry. But of course, Ukraine is trying to warn us that this is not just an isolated case with Russia invading them, but that the ramifications of what's going on with this invasion will have reverberations all throughout the world, including the Middle East.
Hundreds of protesters took to the streets in Toronto, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, where you are, and Berlin to march in solidarity with Iranian protesters who are in favor of toppling the Islamic Republic. Lisa, the latest protests come as the regime officials, they're deploying more security forces throughout Iran. Iran is blaming the West and Israel, naturally, for propagating the demonstrations.
Right, and they continue, right? So the crackdowns have never been this deadly. And juxtapose that with a population that has never been so brave. What we're seeing in Iran is incredible. We are seeing teenagers, children, people in their teens and 20s coming out onto the streets so bravely, and the regime shooting at them point blank. Imagine going to a peaceful protest and not knowing if you're going to make it back home. And that's exactly what's going on. This past week, I'll give you a few anecdotes. A 16-year-old girl was killed at her school because she refused to sing the anthem of the regime. Another athlete, 33-year-old Elnaz Rakabi, went to South Korea to compete in wall climbing. She took off her hijab as a sign of solidarity with the women of Iran. She has been put under house arrest when she got back to Iran, her phone and all her possessions confiscated. There are so many examples of poets and musicians and writers and members of the opposition who have been arrested. There have been many who have been killed, again, point blank, sitting in their car and honking their horn in support of the protesters that are marching by them and shot at literally killed in their cars for just honking their horns. And this is what the Western mainstream media perhaps is missing, is that this has gone on for 6 weeks of this bravery in the crackdowns being so horrifically brutal, but the people coming back out. And I'll tell you how everyone asks the question, what's different this time around? 43 years we've seen the Iranian people come out, and for 43 years they've tried to tell the world that this is not the regime that they want, but each time it was classified by the West and the mainstream media and the leaders in the White House is something different. Egg protests and bizarre protests, and it's over the economy, and it's over this, and it's over a fraudulent election. But this is the first time that the people in Iran and the people outside who support them have been able to be unified in one message alone, and that is that they want freedom and they want regime change. There's nothing else. There are no other specifics, no other nuances. That is what they want, and they are not beating around the bush. The slogans on the street, death to the dictator, they are absolutely clear in their message, and they're unwavering in their message that they want this regime gone.
Well, let me ask you bluntly, can the current Iran movement topple the regime in Iran? What needs to happen?
Probably the most important question. You cannot topple this regime without Western support, and you can't topple this regime without those protesters on the street. So it will require both. And the people in Iran are telling the White House that if you're not going to help us, at least don't stand in our way, meaning step away from the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear negotiations, put sanctions on this regime that will at least help us diminish the power and the tentacles of this regime, or their economic ability, or their nuclear ability, or their ability to hire Basiji fighters to come kill the protesters. They're telling us, if you're not going to support regime change, with which Robert Malley, who is the current Iran envoy in the United States, he's the man who was hired for the sole purpose of getting back into the Iran nuclear negotiations. He has come out on his Twitter to say, we're not going to support a strategy of regime change, to which many Iranians came out and replied to him saying, we don't care. We're going to fight to get our country back. And that is the message that the Iranians are sending us right now. They want us to support them, but if we're not going to have a strategy of supporting regime change, they say at least walk away from the nuclear negotiations. Look, there's a lot of daylight between not supporting regime change and giving this regime billions of dollars, right? So they're saying, at least don't get in our way. Don't give this regime more legitimacy, more money, more power. At least let us do what we're going to do.
The hacktivist group known as Black Reward published documents from Iran's nuclear program after a 24-hour deadline it had given the Islamic government expired, Lisa. The group said it hacked the email system of Iran's nuclear power production development company and threatening to release the classified documents if the regime doesn't stop its crackdown on protesters. How significant was this?
This is amazing. Look, imagine a society in which the hackers are with the people, not against the people. They're not trying to get people's bank information and credit card numbers. They're trying to work for the people in order to basically motivate and bring some momentum to this and really intimidate members of the regime. There have been the personal information of parliament members have been hacked by a different group. In this case, there are actual secrets from their nuclear files that were confiscated, and they gave an ultimatum to the regime. Imagine hackers being able to be fighting for the people and the capacity of saying to the regime, either back off or this is going to continue. It's quite significant, and also points to modern warfare, right? This is a society in which, the people come out on social media and the government shuts them down. Supreme Leader Khamenei has a Twitter account, but he doesn't want other Iranians having Twitter accounts or being online. So they want to use technology against the people, but the people use the technology right back. And in this case, hackers really using technology, really using their cyber capabilities to intimidate, to harass, to threaten the regime, and to really be on the side of the people.
Lisa, there are reports coming out how the United Nations and some other aid groups are allegedly informing migrants around the world how to get to the United States and then cross the border illegally. 6 migrants from Afghanistan shared the story with the Daily Caller News Foundation after they were apprehended in Guatemala.
Yeah, unbelievable, right? Imagine whose side are they on, right? You think about the UN and their responsibility to keep borders safe, to keep countries safe, to keep people safe. Why would you give migrants the confidence or the direction, the guidance to go through a route that is unsafe, that is illegal more than anything else? And again, what about borders? What about laws? What about the legality of all of this? It's horrific. It's not the first time that we have seen such transgressions by the UN. I was on the ground in Syria a few years ago and was able to basically see these UN so-called peacekeepers and what they were up to. And, it's a waste of taxpayer money here in the United States, that's for sure. And I know that a lot of people agree with that statement. But, when you see things like this, you really question the role of the UN and their platform. What are they entrusted to do and how are they carrying it out? Two different things. And in this case, we were fortunate to get these interviews in Guatemala, but we're not always fortunate to really catch them in the act and see what they're really up to.
Now, speaking of the United Nations, there's a new finding by a UN Commission of Inquiry that Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory is now unlawful. I guess this shouldn't be surprising considering this is the second report unilaterally slamming Israel issued by the same body.
Right. So perhaps the UN can't do its job because they are so preoccupied with slamming Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, and then perhaps putting, Iran's regime that is actually waging a war on women right now on the streets of Iran and putting them on the Women's Rights Council. I mean, it's bogus. This is, again, just another stain on the UN and the fact that they do not stand for peace and prosperity. They do not support women's rights. They do not support human rights because if they did, they would not be so biased in not condemning Iran's regime, but then condemning Israel. Again, Israel has supported this movement in Iran. A lot of their parliament members have cut their hair in solidarity. They have lit up their buildings with Iran's flag, shown so much solidarity and support for this current movement. And it's tremendous to see the UN, this body that really just pats itself on the back and thinks it's really the embodiment of human rights and really keeping this standard. But then look at the hypocrisy.
Lisa, the Anti-Defamation League is urging sportswear giant Adidas to end its partnership with rapper Kanye West over his alleged recent anti-Semitic comments. Now, there's word that West allegedly went on a podcast to brag that, quote, "I can literally say anything anti-Semitic and they cannot drop me."
I hope they do. I hope that he is proven wrong, that you cannot be a bigot, you cannot be an anti-Semite, you cannot hate and get away with it. He was dropped by designer Balenciaga in the past few days, but you know what, Hal, people are listening. I know a lot of people want to dismiss him as somebody who's crazy and has gone nuts and he should not be listened to. And of course, that's all true, but his words mean something. Just over the weekend, there were banners on a major overpass here in Los Angeles on the 405 freeway, which is the most busy freeway in this local Los Angeles area. Banners that say Kanye West was right. There are men standing on the overpass with their Heil Hitler hand gestures. Horrific. People are listening. People are taking a cue from somebody who is a pop culture icon. You're a multi-billionaire. I mean, use your time and your words and your platform for good and not for hate. And I really think Adidas and everyone else should take this very seriously and come out to cancel him. Use cancel culture in the right way. This is an instance in which somebody should be canceled, and there should be an example made of him. And there's no two ways about it.
You know, it almost seems like ever since God said to Israel, "You are my chosen people," they've been attacked over and over again, and anti-Semitism is stronger now more than ever. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. It's everywhere. It's on college campuses and it's propagated from the top down. This is not something that starts with the students. It actually ends with the students. It starts with the professors and the administration. And you know what, Hal? Every time there is not action taken by the administration and by those college professors and by people who are running Adidas and everyone else, there will be consequences. That is how this spreads. People wonder how the Holocaust happened. It didn't happen overnight. There were signs in society. Nobody stopped them. No one condemned them. Everyone brushed it away. And that's what happened. And you know what? Here we are responsible. We're responsible when someone is racist. We're responsible when someone is a homophobe or somebody is, shows hatred against Asians or any other minority group. And in this case, we live in a Judeo-Christian Western world in which these values need to be protected. People need to be protected. Judaism is not just a religion, it's a culture. And this is not just a problem for Jews. It's an American problem. It's a Canadian problem. It's a problem wherever it happens. It's a problem for all of society. And that's why it needs to be stopped.
Amen to that. She's one of our regular contributors, Lisa Daftari. Thanks so much for joining us today from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thank you, Hal.
Churches today come in all different shapes and sizes. We have mega churches with tens of thousands of members, some that are in between, and some that are very small with only a handful of people. Today, we're going to talk about these smaller house churches. Joining me today is Pastor Jeff Heth, who leads a neighborhood house church right here in Lethbridge. Pastor Jeff, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, Nav. Love to be a part of what's going on.
Great. And Pastor Jeff, you have experience with all these different sized churches, having pastored large churches in the 1,500 member range and now a house church. Can you first tell us what some of the differences might be? And why don't we start with the strengths and weaknesses of a large church?
Well, yeah, Nav, just like you said, it has been, quite a journey for me, and we've led large churches and led a small church here now, a really small church. But the large church has a lot of benefits to it. I mean, the children's ministry and youth ministry and the young adult ministry, they are great at connecting individuals there. And the large churches also have some great resources as well and leadership to impact the community in a significant way. And so I was part of a church in Calgary that, we were able to help one of our youth small groups to build a house for Habitat for Humanity. So we were able to raise, tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do that. And then we started like a housing secure initiative where we helped 5 families move from housing insecurity to housing security. And that's a little tougher to do in like a house church type of thing, but they have those sorts of resources. And the church that I led here in Lethbridge, they were able to give away multiple laptops to schools and start a feeding or a meal program at one of the schools. And that's what big churches can do. They have great resources there. But as a big church, it seemed like we always longed to get smaller and to get people into relationships as well. And you're always concerned sort of about the back door. Are people coming in and not connecting in some way and then leaving? Or are they really growing as disciples? So those are some of the advantages of large church, but also some of the weaknesses of large church.
So we've talked about large churches. Now let's talk about house churches. What are the pros and cons of those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the smaller churches, like we're a part of here, one of the things that we love is that everybody can be known. In our church, we actually spent, and we're just at the beginning. We're in the first 9 months of our experiment here, but we actually just spent some time walking through our journey of life as couples and individuals. And so you can really know people in that way. There's also true discipleship can happen. And we read a book by Francis Chan called Letter to the Churches, and that's really what spurred us on in this way. And he speaks about how the house church, or the smaller church, in our case, simply church, is a great place and probably the best place for discipleship to happen. In a large church, you want people to get into smaller groups, so this can happen there. And then this is probably a pro and a con, but it's impossible to hide in our church. So the pro of that is that people can really know you. They can reach out to you. They can love you. in this way. And wherever you're at on your spiritual journey, we can meet you there and help you take the next step. And that's the same for me too. People can really know who I am and help me and guide me along in my relationship with Jesus.
Now, you touched about with large churches how they really are able to serve like a vast amount of people and really a different variety. You can see like ways to minister to people like all the way from the cradle to the grave. Can you describe to our viewers how many people and what age groups would be part of a typical house church?
Right. Well, I can say in our church here, we have the people that meet with us, say on a weekly basis on a Sunday morning, which we have young families. So we have, kids from, 2 or 3 years of age up to 10, 12. And then we have some young adults here who would just be in their 20s. And then we have people like myself who are empty nesters. So we have quite a good age range, but, we only have probably about 20, 25 people that would call our house church home on a Sunday morning, but we're also reaching out to our neighbors. And so, that includes people of all ages. But it's just a bit of a smaller group. So it's really relational in nature. And we would consider people who are seeking or who we're just developing relationships with to be part of, that part of our community in that way. Maybe not part of the church, but part of the community there.
Now, for me, I grew up in church. My father was ordained in the Anglican church, so I'm kind of a pastor's kid. But he was also a professor of world religions. So it wasn't just Christian churches we were going to. He was invited to guest speak at synagogues and temples, and so I really got to go to a lot of different buildings, but I've never actually been to a house church. So walk me through this. What exactly does a church gathering look like? Where do you meet? What time? Is there worship time? Is there a sermon?
Yeah, that's right. That's good. We meet at houses. So, hence the moniker house church. So you would come over to my house, Nav, and the first thing you'd do is you'd be welcomed in and we have a meal. So we meet right at 10 o'clock. So the brunch hour on Sunday morning right now for our Sunday morning gatherings, we have other gatherings outside of our time on Sunday morning, but we sit down as families and we'd eat meal together for probably about an hour. And depending on the day, we might have communion as part of that there. So it's really around the table. It's really intergenerational. And it's just part of the meal time there. And then we would go into talking about the scriptures that we've been reading over the past week and engaging and saying, what has God spoken to you? And I might spend some time teaching in there, but it would be more conversational rather than just monologue oriented. And we might share a song in that time, or we might share, a truth that God brought out to us, or I might direct the discussion to a particular part of the passages we've been reading throughout the week. And we've been studying through the book of Acts together recently here. And then we might move into a time of either singing or do another type of worship where we're expressing gratitude to one another for what God has done for us. And then we would move into a time of prayer after that, where we're praying for our neighbors, we're praying for each other, we're praying to see, God work and move in our lives and through us in this time. And, that would be, there are lots of flexibility in there, but that would probably be your normal church gathering time.
Now, before the interview started, we were talking about how your church is on the same street as where I used to live. Now, your church, Simply Church, I didn't see any signage out there, like even when I'm driving around Lethbridge. So I got to ask you, how do people find out about these house churches? Is it simply word of mouth?
Yeah, it would basically be word of mouth. But like I said, we have probably 4 different gatherings that we're part of. And one of them would be, at the very base level, would be a social. And so this summer, actually, we spent a lot of time just inviting people into, a barbecue or whatever. And that can be people who are followers of Christ and people who are not yet followers of Christ. and we're just building relationships. And then you might move into, a time where we've had this before, where we just have a discussion. And the discussion is, is there a topic, the meaning of life, or one of the fruit of the Spirit, or whatever, where we can just sit around, and whether you're a Christ follower or not, people have thought about love. People have thought about the meaning of life, and we just have a deeper discussion. So you could be invited into, or, express an interest in something like that. And then the gathering is a time that I just described to you there. And that's more relational. Yeah. Like, we're not putting a signage out, like you said, but if you're interested in learning more about Jesus, reading the Bible, that sort of thing, it's a great place for you to engage in that way. And then our fourth sort of time would be more an intentional discipleship time, where there's accountability, where there's, deeper sharing than you would just in the group there. And we can focus on our walk with Christ. So you could get in at any one of those levels there, but basically you'd come into the social, be part of our social group there, and then see if you wanted to take a further step with Christ. If not, that's fine. We still long to have a relationship with you and be your friend.
And you mentioned having a barbecue as one of those tools to invite people, which is great. Like, who's going to say no to a barbecue, right?
That's right, exactly. People love food, so that's a wide open door.
Right. And what kinds of reactions do you get from people when you invite them to house church?
Yeah, most of the people that we would invite to house church, and we have so far, have already been friends, or we've had relationship with them. And so, whether they're interested, if they would say, oh yeah, that'd be great, we'd love to come check it out. And we've had some people come check it out and say, oh, yeah, I don't know if this is for us. And some people say, man, I love this. I love the community here. And then people who, are on the journey to getting to know Jesus, some people say, yeah, I'm interested in that. Or that's a little too much for me right now. And any one of those responses is totally fine. Just like inviting people to, a regular church service. Sometimes people are going to say, yep, I'm in. And sometimes people are going to say, no, it's a little weird for me. So.
Now, we've talked about barbecues. Now, I understand that sharing a meal together is often considered one of the key events at a house church. Can you tell me, why is that?
Well, I don't do much of the cooking, Nav, so that's one of the advantages, because if I had to cook for this, it wouldn't be good. People wouldn't want to come. But having everybody bring something, a potluck in nature, you get to try a lot of great food. And so that is really an attraction. And then we see this throughout Scripture as well, but lots of great spiritual conversations happen around food, because that's where you're developing relationships and getting to know one another. And so, yeah, it's a key part. And then, like I said, putting communion in that as well, reminding us of the body of Jesus Christ, which is broken for our sake, and his blood that has given us freedom from our sins. It's a fabulous thing. So, yeah, it really is a high point about that, and something that people really enjoy.
Now, house churches do lend themselves well to discipleship. Why is this important, Pastor Jeff?
Well, and this is one of the things when I was leading a larger church that took me a while to understand, is discipleship really happens in relationship. And so when I was part of a church up in Calgary, we planted multiple sites, and we were hoping that people would become disciples just because we were planting multiple sites. So we planted a second site, a third site, a fourth site. And what we really found is we were getting the same results. We were just perpetuating our DNA, which was good, but we weren't getting the type of discipleship that we wanted. So then we got everybody into small groups. And actually, at the church there, we had 100% of our Sunday morning attendance, which was about 1,000 adults, in small groups at the time. But we were still frustrated because we weren't seeing the type of disciples that we wanted to be made. So then we flipped our focus around. And one of my mentors said this. He said, I'm sure it's not unique to him, but he said, if you plant churches, you may or may not make disciples. But if you make disciples, you will always grow churches. And so we started focusing on making disciples and what are the things that we needed to do to make disciples. And, that has some element of teaching and that, but really what it has to do is life on life relationship where you're mentoring people just like Jesus did with his disciples. And it seems simple when you put it that way, but really it takes this deeper sort of relationship. And so that's what we're attempting to do in Simply Church, is focus on the relationship, not just the gathering, if you will.
Now, do you have any plans to expand your neighborhood house church? And if so, would that mean having someone volunteer to step up to invest time to lead this in another home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great question. In our discipleship growth in our understanding, there is this idea that Jesus gave to us in Matthew chapter 28 that we should go and make disciples of all the nations, teaching them to obey all the things I've commanded you. And so our definition of a discipleship would be one who hears the voice of God, obeys, and then teaches other people to do the same. And so then our hope is that, as we teach and as we reproduce, as Jesus Christ calls us to in this disciples, that there would be growth, and then there would be, other churches that are planted in houses outside of this doing the very same thing. So our hope, our prayer is that this begins a movement of, discipleship gatherings, really, house churches, which we've called Simply Church. So yes, we long, but God has given us disciples here and we're growing them in that way. And if other people come and join us as well, we are hoping that they will continue to, reproduce other discipleship, mentoring groups.
So raising disciples. So when your house caps out, then what you've planted into these people is duplicatable, and can just grow and grow and grow. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's right. And I think what we want to use is the word organic, but I've been frustrated sometimes to understand what that means. And I've been thinking about it. It means three things. It's simple, it's relational, and it's repeatable. So Simply Church is simple, it's relational, and then what we do here is repeatable, and how we build disciples is repeatable. So anybody can do it. You don't have to be a trained pastor. You can just be somebody who loves Jesus and spend some time with his followers.
And that just seems so simple. Thanks so much for joining us today, Pastor Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Nav. I appreciated getting a chance to talk with you about this.
Jeff Heth leads a neighborhood house church right here in Lethbridge. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.